Hi, in this video I'm going to show you what is complex number and how do we add and subtract complex number. So before we start complex number, let me tell you something about imaginary unit, okay? So in complex number system, the basic unit, very basic unit is the imaginary unit, and then how do we define it is a number whose square is -1 is called imaginary unit, okay? The number whose square is -1 is called imaginary unit, and we denote that by I. So the square of I is -1. That's the definition of imaginary unit, okay? Square of I is -1. Then I is called the imaginary unit. So why do we need this? Okay, let's see that. Let me tell you, let me give you some examples. So what is the square root of 4? It is 2. It is straightforward, right? But we don't know what is the square root of -4 in the real number. It is not a real number, it is a complex number. So here there is a square root, and then under the square root there is negative number. So in that case it is not a real number, it is a complex number. So we're going to write this using I. So how do we use that? So square root of -4 can be written as -1 times 4, correct? But what is the value of -1? -1 is I squared. So it is I squared times 4, right? So what is the square root of I? It is just, what is the square root of I squared? Square root of I squared, from here if you take square root of I squared, will be square root of -1. So square root of I squared is just I equals to square root of -1, right? So this is I. So basically what you do is square root of I squared is I, or you can write -1, square root of -1 is basically I. So it is I times 2, square root of 4 is 2, square root of I squared is I, okay? So I times 2 or 2I. Note that if there was plus, you cannot write like I and 2. You cannot write I plus 2 if there was plus. If there is a product, you can distribute that square root to I squared separately and 4 separately, and then write the product sign in the middle, okay? That's how it works. So square root of -4 is 2I. So how about this? It will be -1 times 9. That is -1 is again I squared times 9. So the square root of I squared is I, and the square root of 9 is 3. So it will be 3I. So this is how we find square root of the negative number using I. Okay. Next, we want to use this I to define a complex number. Okay. So a number of the form a plus bi, where I is the imaginary unit, is called complex number. We denote a complex number by small letter G or W or U or V, like these type of numbers. Or sometimes we call like G1, G2, W1, W2, like that. Okay. So for example, G equals to A plus BI or IB. It is a complex number. Okay, so here A is a real number, B is a real number. When you attach I, then it will become a complex number. What is the value of I? I is square root of -1, or you can say I squared is -1. Okay, the first number or the number without I is called real part, and the number that comes with I, that is B, is called imaginary part. Okay. So another example of a complex number is U equals to 3 minus 4I. What is the real part? On this problem, real part is 3. So this is real part. And what is the imaginary part is -4. So imaginary part is -4 in this problem, because that comes with I. So can you tell me what is the real part here? So real part is the one that does not come with I. So there is no such number, right? So the real part here is 0. Imaginary part is -3, because imaginary part is the number that multiplies I. Okay. However, here, what is the real part? Real part is the one that does not come with I. So real part is 5. So this is real part, and there is no imaginary part because there is no I. Okay. So imaginary part is 0 in this example. So this is how we find real part and the imaginary part of a complex number. All right. Now, since the complex number, these type of numbers are very new to you, because you have seen a number like 2, 3, 7, 10, like that, but you haven't seen a number like this, 3 minus 4i. It is a single number. It is a complex number. Okay. This is another complex number. This is another complex number, like that. Since this is new for you guys, I want to tell you how to add a complex number with another complex number. how to subtract complex number from another complex number, how to multiply two complex number, and how to divide. Okay, so how do we add? Let's give an example. But before that, to add complex number, what we do is you add real parts separately and the imaginary part separately, or you add real part with the real part, imaginary part with the imaginary part, like that. Okay, let's see this example. Here g is given as 3 minus I. Can you tell me what is the real part here? Yes, that is 3. And what is the imaginary part? That is -1. Yes, because it is like -1 times I. So the number that multiplies with I is the imaginary part. So W is another complex number, 1 plus 2i. What is the real part? 1. Imaginary part is positive 2. On this U is another complex number. What is the real part? Real part is the one that does not come with I. That is -2 is the real part. And then 1 is the imaginary part. So to find out real part and the imaginary part, you don't look at their order. You look at whether it comes with I, then that is imaginary part. If it comes with without I, that is the real part. Okay, now how do I add these two? So write down the value of g. 3 minus I plus W is 1 plus 2i. Let's look at the like terms. You add 3 with 1, okay, and then I with -I with 2i. So what do you get? It is 3 plus 1 is 4, and then 2i minus I is plus I. So g plus W is basically 4 plus I. Okay, now you want to subtract W minus U. W is 1 plus 2i, okay, minus U is I minus 2. So whenever you have you subtract, or whenever there is a negative sign, you always use parenthesis for that. Okay, now so let me distribute that negative sign. Negative means basically it is -1. So 1 plus 2i, and then -I, because you are distributing this negative sign. Negative times I is -I. Negative times minus 2 is plus 2, because that is double negative and 2. So what do you get? There is 1 plus 2, because you just, these are the like terms, right? You can add these two. 1 plus 2 is 3, and then 2i minus I is plus I. So W minus U is 3 plus I. This is how you subtract. Now how do you multiply? Let's see that. G times W. G is 3 minus I times W is 1 plus 2i. Let's multiply these two. So what do you get? Now you need to FOIL, right? So 3 times 1 is 3, and then 3 times 2i is plus 6i, because there is plus sign. 3 times 1 is 3, and then plus 3 times twice I is 6i. Now -I times 1 is -I, and then -I times positive 2i is -2i squared. Now how do I simplify? Okay, so this is like 3, makes sense, and the 6i minus I is 5i plus 5i. And how about the last one? -2 is there, -2, but what is the value of I squared? You're right, I squared is -1. So -1, -2 times -1. Let's collect all those terms. 3 plus 5i, and -2 minus 1 will be plus 2. So it is basically 5 plus 5i plus 5i. That's what you will get. Okay, and the final example is U times G minus U times W. Okay, so what is U? U is I minus 2, and then G minus W. G is 3 minus I minus W is 1 plus 2i. Right? So what do you get? It is I minus 2, and then you just simplify this. 3 minus I minus 1 minus twice I. Okay? So it is I minus 2, and then 3 minus 1 is 2, and then minus I minus twice I is minus 3i. Now you got the product of two numbers like this, right? It is similar to the third problem, and you complete what you get. Alright guys? Thank you very much.